12 Tone News proudly presents KBDI Broadcasting's award-winning program, Colorado Inside Out, bringing you the city, the state, the nation, and the world. With your host, Mr. Stanley Stack, and his guests, Miss Helen Bonfils, Mrs. Eliza Carney, Professor Israel Ben Kopelwitz, and Mr. Robert Chase. Brought to you by Packard Motor Cars. Packard. Ask the man who owns one. And now, Colorado Inside Out is on the air. Dateline, April 14, 1935, Palm Sunday. After 4 years of drought, an Arctic front pushes an immense cloud of parched earth across the high plains of Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. The storm, complete with thunder and lightning, fills the lungs of a populace in panic. Hundreds are hospitalized with dust-induced pneumonia. Many die spitting up mud. Children and the elderly prove most vulnerable to the desolation of Black Sunday.
Good evening, ladies and gents. I'm your host, Stanley Stack. Welcome to this edition of Colorado Inside Out. Just when we thought the hard times could get no worse, even Mother Nature has turned against us. Some experts blame poor farming practices for the series of dust storms that we've been experiencing. Just 9 days after Black Sunday, on April 23rd, Congress created the Soil Conservation Service, led by Hugh Bennett, considered the father of the soil conservation movement. Is this too little, too late? Our first guest tonight, Miss Helen Bonfils, publisher of the Denver Post. Good to see you, ma'am.
Good to be here. Hello, you good people of Radioland. You know, when I was last on this show was 8 years ago, and when we think about what it was like in this country, the economy was going so well. I had not yet inherited the paper. My sainted father just died 2 years ago, but now we see how business is being affected. We're not doing as badly as Mr. Chase's paper. You know, someday, no doubt, the Denver Post will be the only paper left in Denver. But in some ways, these farmers brought it on themselves. You know, the trains encouraged them to come here. The theory was water will follow the rain will follow the plow. Well, rain did not follow the plow, but in the meantime, they had dug up all that good grassland, and that's what's blowing across Colorado now. So it is too little too late because they have already dug up all the grassland that would hold that dust out.
Well, thank you. Our second chair today, Mrs. Eliza Carney. Ma'am, nice to have you here.
Thank you very much. Are you going to mention that I do have a law degree from Howard University?
Well, that's wonderful. Not many of us do.
Okay. You know,
I'm working on mine.
as someone who's committed to good social and human relations, I really hate to agree with Ms. Bonfils. But in many ways, the farmers did bring this on themselves. But this is where I disagree. You cannot let them suffer. Times are so hard in Colorado, in Denver, in our country. We cannot let them suffer. So it's about time that Congress did step in. On the other hand, I do think that if we had paid more attention to the natives that have been corralled into reservations in this country and respected their relationships with our earth, we'd be in a better place.
Well, with us in the third chair, ace reporter for the Rocky Mountain News, Mr. Robert Chase.
Well, thank you very much. And I, too, was here back on the last time we did this with Ms. Bonfils. And I'm still toiling away at the Rocky Mountain News and working my way up. But my wife, Mary Chase, has, as you know, has quit, and she's working with the federal program now, the Federal Writers Project. She wants to be a playwright. She's working on her first play. They're going to put it on at the Baker Theater sometime next spring. So we hope you'll all come out. It's called Me Third. But as for me, I'm out there in the field. I'm actually doing the...
Oh, my goodness.
I just got back from Genoa, out on Highway 24, and I can tell you that if these dust storms keep up the way they are, we're going to lose our rank as the highest elevation state in the Union. We lost about 6 feet of dirt out there. What we need to do is do what the good people of Crowley County have done and start looking at trans-mountain diversions of our water resources, try to boost agriculture on the eastern plains and get those crops in and hold the soil better. Right now, with the Boulder Dam just finished, we're going to have California stealing all the water that we can't keep, that it's our right, but we can't store it right now out on the west slope. You look at the Twin Lakes Tunnel and the whole system going to the Arkansas River. We can do that for the Platte. We need our new Mayor Stapleton, who's just back in office now, to get moving again on lining that Moffett Tunnel, the pilot bore. We got the trains going through now, but we still got the pilot bore. Let's line that and let's get the Fraser River water down into our valley and use that.
Well, that's dramatic testimony from Mr. Chase. Batting cleanup today, Mr. Israel Ben Koplowitz, a professor of law at the Westminster Law School.
Thank you for having me on this show. I really appreciate that. It's certainly, I teach bankruptcy law, and I got to tell you, this Dust Bowl's been great for all my students who learn bankruptcy law. They've got more business than ever. The fact is, droughts happen. That's just part of nature. You know, you go down to Four Corners, Mesa Verde. The Anasazi came in, they built all these swell cliff dwellings, and then they had to hightail it out of had to hightail it out of town because they had a 23-year drought. So we're experiencing that again, and it's just the way things are in the West. But one thing the federal government's done has made it worse is they have these open ranges where anybody can graze their cattle, and they should have sold the property, that land to the state or given it to the state instead of having it be this commons, and overgrazing and eating the grass down too far by all the sheep and the cattle ranchers has been an important cause of this whole problem. But that said, maybe this soil conservation thing will work out. I think it's certainly long overdue, and it really is a multi-state problem. So maybe this is something where President Roosevelt can accomplish something constructive for a change.
Kind of a classic tragedy of the commons. Let's move on to topic 2. When Franklin Roosevelt became president 2 years ago, 25% of all Coloradans were out of work due to the drought and poor prices for farm goods. Over 40% of Colorado farms have now been foreclosed upon. Roosevelt created the Works Progress Administration in April of this year as part of the Emergency Appropriations Act. He also signed the Social Security Act this year. Some have hailed these new programs as the country's salvation. Others, including a few Democrats, strongly disagree. Our own governor, Democrat Edwin C. Johnson, has been fighting every effort to send New Deal dollars to our state. Colorado's U.S. Senator Edward P. Costigan and Federal Relief Administrator Paul Shriver have been the focus of much of Big Ed's ire. We spoke with the governor about his passionate opposition to FDR's programs.
I believe these radicals like Senator Costigan, President Roosevelt, and his relief administrator, Paul Shriver, are heading us down a path of socialism. Oh, Joe Stalin would be proud. Why, folks here in the West have always been a self-sufficient, independent people. It just goes against the grain of the values that founded our state to be relying on these handouts. And just how do these Washington types think this country is going to pay for all of this? I'm afraid that this New Deal will be the death of the Democratic Party as we know it. Mark my words.
So, will this New Deal be Colorado's salvation or its doom? Ms. Bonfils.
Well, I think we cannot just be giving people a handout, but if we can use some of that money with the project at Red Rocks, which is a stunning project. You know, I appreciate your wife's work in the theater. I'm very theatrical. And what a beautiful facility that Red Rocks Coliseum could become. I can just see wonderful performances there. You know, we have a foundation. We've been giving money away since 1927, and the need is too great. We need more help, and if it's coming from Washington, I think we should take it.
Mrs. Carney, what about your thoughts?
Oh, for goodness sake. Governor Johnson and other demagogues have been seeing communists underneath our beds ever since 1917. And so the New Deal could really help Coloradans, but not if it's up to Governor Ed Johnson and our state legislature. Thank goodness for Reverend Wahlberg and the other citizens of Denver who have actually realized there are poor men, there are poor women who are starving, and they have come to the rescue. And I tell you, if the governor doesn't start doing the business of those elite business interests, he is a Democrat after all, I thought they were the party of the people. If he doesn't stop doing the work of the elite business interests, we're going to have a march on the state capitol just like we had last year when all those poor men, you remember, when they invaded the Senate chamber. It's going to happen again, and next time I'll be with them.
Mr. Chase, all this talk about independence and self-sufficiency, kind of hard to be self-sufficient if you can't eat.
Well, I'll tell you what, the farmers out on the Eastern Plains where I just spent the last week are really hurting. not just through the dust storms. And they are in this collectively. They're not in this individually, because what affects one farm is going to affect the next farm out there. So many of these farms are in foreclosure right now. Why some of the moneyed people here in Denver, some of the families like the Fulham-Winers, buying up farms for cents on the dollar just northeast of town. You know, Mayor Stapleton probably should have thought of putting his stupid airport somewhere way out there on that property out there, and we wouldn't have to have it here on Brown Cannon's dairy farm, if you know what I mean. But I'll tell you what, the Civilian Conservation Corps, already at work on the West Slope, doing a great job building Rimrock Drive right outside Grand Junction in the Colorado Monument there. And if we can get our act together, we could get those camps in Morrison active and get the recruits in there and start construction. George Kramer, that Ben Stapleton brought in to be his public works guy, he wants to build that amphitheater, but the mayor's not quite sure he wants to do that. I would really encourage him to go ahead and do that, because that will be, if they can get rid of that infestation of beetles that are out there, we should never have any of those beetles there at Red Rocks. But given that, I think we should go ahead and do it.
Well, Mr. Koplowitz, some are going to say the Lochner era is over, that capitalism and the free markets haven't done what they promised to do. How can you argue with the Social Security Administration and some of these other programs to help people who can't eat?
Sure, what you just said, that the capitalism's over, individualism's over, that's what Mussolini was saying when he took over. That's what Lenin was saying when he took over. Mussolini was the big toast of all the media here in the United States for decades, till 15 years, until he got unpopular because he invaded Ethiopia. And the fact is, Roosevelt's economic program is mostly copied from Mussolini. You could call it socialist or fascist or whatever it is, but it's the opposite of freedom, like this National Recovery Administration he's got. We're hearing about elite business. What it does is you take the elite business, you get big business, big labor, big government, all in a room, and they divide the whole industry into a cartel. So that's for the purpose of chiseling the little guy. Every time you get all the bigs together, it's going to be terrible for the little folks.
Let's move on to topic 3. Immigration has become another favorite issue for our governor. Big Ed has been threatening to send National Guard troops to the New Mexico state line to prevent Okies and Mexicans from entering Colorado to take jobs. In his most recent blast against Federal Relief Administrator Paul D. Shriver, Johnson writes, "On behalf of Colorado taxpayers, our unemployed citizens, patriotic organizations, and good citizens generally, I most respectfully demand that no alien and no person not a citizen of the state be given employment in the Public Works program. Some feel that these migrants are being wrongfully targeted for the labor woes in our state, saying transients, not migrants, are the real problem. Do you support Governor Johnson's threat to send state troopers to protect our border from these migrants, or are the farms that are employing them the source of the problem?" Mrs. Carney.
Governor Johnson, oh, what a blackguard. He doesn't want to get federal help so that we can go to work. And then when you have men and women, particularly with brown skins, who are coming into our state seeking work like any human being would, he's threatening to set up a blockade. That is absolutely incredible, and it's so very American, because there is this strain in America where you always blame the little guy. You don't go after the sugar beet companies, the sugar companies. You don't go after Great Western. You don't go after Holly Sugar. And face it, they are going to Mexico. They are hiring contractors. They are bringing folks here. They are building up little shanty towns for the workers to live in, all for their profits. And what does Governor Johnson do? He wags his finger at the men and women who are coming here because, goodness gracious, they want a Christian chance. What a blackguard.
Well, Mr. Chase, Mrs. Carney makes a good point here. As the son myself of Polish immigrants, I'm from Chicago, moved out here recently. I've seen Poles, I've seen the Irish, I've seen a lot of folks get blamed, and it's usually the most recent wave of immigrants. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, I think you're right. The Mexicans are coming up here. They're doing hard work. Now, I can see his point on the Okies, maybe. But the Mexicans, come on. You cannot fence in this state. You can't build a border fence along our southern border. It's ridiculous. The Constitution, the Bill of Rights, guarantees freedom of travel from state to state to all citizens and all those who are here legally. Now, you go across our southern border, what do you have? You go all the way from Springfield, to Trinidad, to Antonito, to Pagosa, to Durango. That's a huge border to try to set up a blockade. Folks could easily come across. I think in the end, we'll find out that this wave of immigrants is actually the backbone to our eventual economic recovery. These people will form the market and the base for our economic recovery, and better for us than the states that they're leaving behind.
Mr. Koplowitz, your thoughts on the immigration situation?
Well, I can't possibly see how having a bunch of Okies move into this state is going to help our economy, but I do agree with your point that we are the United States of America, and if you're an American citizen from Oklahoma, you've got a right to move to any other state. And Governor Johnson, even though I think he's a great Democratic governor, just like Governor Landon from New York, Roosevelt's predecessor there, was criticizing Roosevelt for all his fascist and socialist policies, but I think Governor Johnson's wrong on this one. But I think he's also right to say that American jobs paid for by American taxpayers, these big public works projects, they ought to go to Americans. They're not for the benefit of Pachecos from Mexico. We need to help Americans first.
Thank you, Mr. Koplowitz. Let's go to Ms. Bonfils for comment.
Well, I must disagree with Mrs. Carney. I don't think the governor is a blackguard. He is protecting Coloradans. And let's face it, it is our job to first and foremost give the people in Colorado jobs, to help the people in Colorado. This is our state. And many of those good people in Colorado are from Mexico originally. As you know, we have a very vast, interesting heritage that you can see in the southern portion of the state. But I think he's absolutely right to focus on giving people here in Colorado jobs. I have hired as many Okies as I can to do my gardens, but at this point, we need to focus on the folks here at home.
Interesting comment on this very controversial topic. Let's move on to topic 4. For our next discussion topic, let's go to a 12-tone news report.
Dateline, spring 1935. Less than a generation after the end of the Great War, Europe appears once again to be on the precipice of war. In defiance of the terms of the armistice signed at Versailles, German Chancellor Adolf Hitler openly rearms by announcing formation of the Luftwaffe, a new German Air Force. Meanwhile, across the world, Japan makes new incursions into China. 4 years after their theft of Manchuria, Japanese militarists want more. Japanese troops push into northern China and threaten Peking. Not to be outdone, on October 2nd, Italian fascist dictator Benito Mussolini invades Ethiopia, a modern army against a medieval one. Ethiopia's emperor Haile Selassie makes an impassioned plea to the world for relief.
And with Mussolini advancing in Africa, Japanese incursions into China, and Adolf Hitler's flagrant disregard for the Treaty of Versailles, do you agree with our country and President Roosevelt's continued isolationist stance? Mr. Chase.
I'd have to say I disagree with our president on this. I think we need to have a policy of engagement, because I believe that America is meant to be a world leader. We're in hard times right now, but we're going to come out of this, and America will lead the way, but we will only do that if we have a policy of engagement. I believe with people like Mussolini and Chancellor Hitler, if we reach out and try to appease them and give them what they want and not engage, I fear for the circumstances, to tell you the truth. Some people are talking about pulling out of the Olympics in Berlin. I disagree. We need to be there, and we need to win them. And we need to show them that they are not the master race.
Would you agree with that assessment, Professor Koplowitz?
Well, I'd agree with what he said about Mussolini and Stalin and Hirohito all being real bad guys, but the fact is there's nothing we can do about it. One of Woodrow Wilson's stupidest idea of all was this League of Nations. We can see what a complete failure it is about doing anything about the Italian invasion of Ethiopia. And frankly, all these British and French diplomats running around with their dresses over their heads about it, they're complete hypocrites. The whole rest of that continent has been colonized by them, and so now the Italians want to grab a colony for themselves too. The other thing, Mussolini's a bad guy, but he's no worse than any of the rest of the Europeans for taking whatever he could get out of Africa or Asia. And the fact is, Haile Selassie, there's some crazy religion out of Jamaica that actually thinks he's the Messiah, but he's just as bad a dictator as Mussolini or the rest of them. He's from an ethnic minority in that country called the Amhara, and he runs it like a dictator, oppresses the other groups like the Oromo. He's a lousy guy, just as bad as Mussolini himself. In that war between the two of them, I hope they both lose.
Ms. Bonfils, our great country has plenty of its own problems right now. Do we need to be getting involved in things overseas?
Well, I think we need to focus on our problems here at home. You know, I've been to Europe many times. I've been fortunate to travel in style frequently. And I have to say, it breaks my heart to see what's happening in Europe. You know, Europe, Mr. Koplowitz is correct. They have always had taken their empires. They can work this out. I don't always agree with Mr. Roosevelt, but it is time for us to focus on things here at home. Mr. Chase is also right, though. If we go to the Olympics and if we win, we can show them that we have American spirit, and that is the best way we can convince them to follow our path.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Well, Ms. Carney, these foreign adventures, we thought they were settled in the Great War.
Well, I don't understand, Ms. Bonfils, how we can show the Germans anything. If that fast runner that we're all talking about, Jesse Owens, wins, he wins the Olympics in Germany, and then he comes home. In certain states, he can't even be served. For goodness sake, right here in Denver, Colorado, my children had to sit in the balcony of the Paramount just to see one of those moving picture shows. I must agree, and you do know that the colored newspapers in Denver have been quite lively with Italy's invasion of Ethiopia, but I must agree with A. Philip Randolph of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. We have to make democracy safe for Negroes right here in Denver, Colorado, and Georgia and Mississippi. If these Germans believe they're the master race, I believe they got that idea right here in the United States.
Okay. Sir, did you have a comment to that?
Just a harumph. Sorry.
All right, we have just a few minutes left, about 4.5 minutes left. Let's move on to Disgrace of the Week. Ms. Bonfils.
You know, a very, very sad chapter has come to an end this year. Baby Doe Tabor, you know, her name is synonymous really with much of the great history of this state, just passed away. I think you all know the story. You know, they had run through their fortune. Don't know how they did it, but she did run through her fortune. She did not really keep an eye on things. She wound up dying up at the Matchless Mine alone, frozen to death. Very, very sad story about Colorado. Fortunately, her husband, Horace Tabor's legacy will live on with that beautiful Tabor Theater in downtown Denver. That place will stand forever, and it's a lovely monument.
Poor thing. Mrs. Carney.
Well, as you know, John Galen Locke died recently. He's the scoundrel who brought the Ku Klux Klan to Colorado. Well, he just dropped dead in a hotel, and he was, I believe, just the disgrace of the century in Colorado. Good riddance.
Mr. Chase.
Well, there you go. Well, mine's a little closer to home, to tell you the truth. And I can't believe that they're doing this. But Louis Ballast and his little Humpty Dumpty barrel drive-in up there on Spear Boulevard, up by North High School, has come up with this cheeseburger. Cheeseburger. Now, which is it? Is it a burger or is it cheese?
It's really quite
I don't
good.
get it, and I don't think it'll fly. No way.
It's really quite good.
Ah.
Mr. Koplowitz.
Well, let's talk about the radio. It's been swell to listen to the baseball games and the presidential elections and things like that, but the radio has been something that's really been the greatest tool for these socialist fascists. You got over in in Germany, Hitler's got this great radio voice, hypnotizes all the Germans, speaking to him on the radio. And here in the United States, we got another socialist fascist Jew hater, Father Coughlin. He's got an audience of 40 million. A third of the people in this country are listening to that guy every week. And that's a terribly dangerous thing for our democracy. And the founders would have never wanted any kind of demagogue like that to be influencing the people.
All right. With about 2.5 minutes left, let's move on to something nice.
Well, I'd like to say one man who was a master at using the radio, Will Rogers, who just passed in that horrible plane crash. You know, I didn't used to be in the newspaper business. It funded my life. But now that I'm a publisher, I realize how important it is to have people who can really write and speak to the people, to engage them. That's what's going to keep our media alive on radio, in newspapers. And, you know, someday it could be that there are whole groups of people who stand up and give their opinions and act like pundits. But really, Will Rogers is really a wonderful trendsetter.
Ms. Carney.
Hurrah for Senator Edward Costigan. He and Senator Wagner are sponsoring a bill to outlaw lynching in the United States. So far in 1935, there have been 25 recorded lynchings of colored men and a few women in this country. It's a disgrace. Hurrah for our Senator Costigan.
All right. Sir.
Miss Helen, I'm just wondering, did Will Rogers ever meet your father, by the way? Just wondering. Anyway, the zipper, okay?
Quite an invention.
Clothing manufacturers have just this year started introducing the zipper into men's pants. And I'll tell you, for one thing, I'm very happy with that. Don't have to deal with them buttons anymore. I hope this continues.
It's one style change we can live with. Mr. Koplowitz.
We could end lynchings down there a lot faster if those southern states would change their laws so that colored people could carry handguns for protection. I've got to praise the United States Supreme Court in their unanimous opinion, striking down Roosevelt's National Recovery Administration, saying you've got no power under the Constitution to run the entire economy like some cartel plaything of yours, and it's important. That was a unanimous opinion. Justice Brandeis, one of the great progressives of all time, joined in that opinion. All the justices, whatever their political theories or ideologies, they recognized Roosevelt was going too far, and I hope they continue to stick to their guns.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for this radio broadcast of Colorado Inside Out. Be sure to stay tuned to this radio station for all of the 12-Tone News updates and important information. For everyone here at 12-Tone News, I'm Stanley Stack.